The Tycoon's Legacy. Before you dive in, consider this. How much would you sacrifice for a secret you believe is protecting those you love? The air in Aspen, Colorado, was crisp with the first hint of autumn, a stark contrast to the boiling tension in the grand ballroom of the Grand Summit Hotel. This wasn't just a hotel. It was the heart of a vast hospitality empire, and tonight, its CEO, Julian Thorne, was hosting his annual gala. The room glittered with the elite of the finance world, but amidst the shimmering lights, Serena Hayes, Julian's wife of 2 years, felt a quiet desperation. Tucked away in her emerald clutch was a life-altering secret, a positive pregnancy test. After 2 years of a marriage built more on business mergers than on affection, Serena believed this baby would finally bridge the distance between her and Julian. She found him holding court with a group of investors, his face a mask of effortless power. "Julian," she whispered, "can we speak privately?" His gaze, cold as a mountain lake in winter, cut her off. He excused himself with a practiced, charming smile that didn't reach his eyes and led her into his private study, the door closing with a heavy thud. "What could be so urgent as to interrupt me during a crucial negotiation?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. With trembling hands, Serena pulled out the test. "We're going to be parents, Julian." The silence that followed was more brutal than any argument. Julian took the small plastic stick, examining it as if it were a fraudulent stock certificate. His handsome, chiseled features remained utterly emotionless. "Whose is it?" The question hit Serena like a physical blow. She staggered back, clutching the edge of his mahogany desk for support. "What are you implying? It's yours, of course." Julian's laugh was hollow and without a trace of humor. "Please, Serena, we both know I can't have children. My doctors were very clear about that." The world seemed to tilt on its axis for Serena. "What are you talking about? You never told me." "I didn't see the need to," he said, the coldness in his voice intensifying. "Our marriage was a convenience, a merger of our family's business empires. I never promised you a fairy tale." Tears welled in Serena's eyes, ruining the meticulous makeup she had spent hours applying. "You're lying. You're saying this to hurt me, to justify your absences, your affairs." Julian's face darkened, a flash of pure fury in his eyes. "So now I'm the unfaithful one? How convenient, darling. But this show is over." He walked to the door, flinging it open. The murmur of the party rushed into the room like a tidal wave. Without looking back at her, he uttered the words that would shatter her world. "I want you out of my house tonight. My lawyers will contact you tomorrow." Serena's breath hitched. "You can't be serious. You can't throw me out like this in front of everyone." A cruel smile played on Julian's lips as he walked back into the ballroom. He raised a champagne flute, capturing the attention of the hushed crowd with a gentle clink of glass. "My dear friends, I regret to interrupt this wonderful evening for a personal announcement. As many of you know, honesty and loyalty are fundamental values in my life and in my business. That is why I am forced to inform you that my marriage to Serena has come to an end tonight." A wave of surprise rippled through the room. Serena, frozen in the doorway, felt every gaze like a dagger. Julian continued, his voice perfectly controlled. "The reasons are strictly personal, but I trust you will respect our privacy during this difficult time. The party, of course, continues." With those words, he had sealed her fate. The guests, after the initial shock, began whispering, their theories and rumors feeding the growing scandal. Julian's mother, Eleanor Thorne, a woman of 70 with an unwalkable poise, rushed to Serena's side. "What happened, my dear?" she whispered, taking Serena's hands. "I'm pregnant, Eleanor, and Julian says the baby can't be his. He says he can't have children." Eleanor's eyes widened, then narrowed with a flash of understanding. "My son is a liar. That pride of his, it's just like his father's. Before she could say more, Victoria Hayes, Julian's legal director and rumored mistress, approached with a barely concealed smirk. "Serena, my dear, I've called a taxi. It's waiting at the back entrance to avoid any discomfort." The humiliation was complete. With the last shreds of her dignity, Serena went to her room, packing a small bag with a few essentials. Tears blurred her vision as she took a final look at what had been her home. Photos of her wedding, vacations, moments she had believed were happy. It had all been an elaborate lie. As she went down the service stairs, she ran into Julian's younger brother, Leo, who waited for her with a troubled expression. "I can't believe what my brother is doing," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. "I promise this won't be the end of it." Serena pulled away gently. "Don't get involved, Leo. You know your brother. His pride is stronger than any feeling. But the baby? This baby and I will be fine," Serena said, placing a protective hand over her belly. "I promise." A heavy rain began to fall as she got into the taxi, as if the sky were crying with her. Before she left, she took one last look at the brightly lit mansion, where music and laughter continued, as if nothing had happened. She swore to herself that she would never return, that she would never beg for the love or recognition of a man incapable of feeling. Do you think Serena will ever find happiness after this betrayal? What do you think Julian's true motivation was for acting with such cruelty? Share your thoughts below. 5 years later, Julian Thorne, now 42, stood in his office on the top floor of the skyscraper that housed the headquarters of the Thorne Group. He was the most influential figure in the American tourism industry, with properties on 3 continents. Yet, the premature wrinkles on his forehead and the gray hairs at his temples betrayed the high cost of his success. "The numbers for the last quarter are concerning, Julian," said Victoria, now his official girlfriend and the group's legal director. "The expansion in South America is costing us more than anticipated." Julian barely heard her. The same dream had tormented him the night before. Serena, holding a baby with his own face, crying. He always woke up at the same moment. Just as he tried to touch the child, it vanished from his fingers. "Julian, are you listening?" Victoria's voice brought him back to reality. "Of course, prepared you a detailed report for the board meeting. I don't want any surprises." The international expansion had been his big gamble, but also his biggest strategic mistake. To finance it, he had been forced to take on new investors, making him a hostage to shareholders who didn't share his long-term vision. His control over the empire he had built was weakening with each passing day. His phone interrupted his thoughts. It was Eleanor, his mother. "Son, are you coming to lunch on Sunday? I haven't seen you in weeks." "I'm too busy, Mom. Maybe next month." Eleanor's sigh was filled with disappointment. "Julian, you can't go on like this. Ever since Serena left—" "Don't say her name," he interrupted abruptly. "That woman no longer exists to me. That woman was carrying your child when you threw her out like a criminal. My grandchild, whom I've never met." Julian closed his eyes, trying to control the rage that always consumed him when this subject came up. "You know perfectly well that child couldn't have been mine. And if it was?" Eleanor challenged him. "Did it ever occur to you that the doctors could have been wrong? Or would you rather believe you're sterile than accept the possibility that you abandoned your own flesh and blood?" Julian hung up without responding. His mother had never understood. She had never seen Serena as the opportunist she was. She had entered his life under the pretense of a business merger, seducing him with her apparent innocence. When he discovered her infidelity, he didn't hesitate to cut ties. But deep down, a doubt gnawed at him. What if his mother was right? What if the doctors had been wrong? He had spent 5 years building a wall around that possibility, refusing to investigate, to look for answers, to know the truth. The annual party for the Thorne Group was in full swing at the Grand Summit Hotel. 5 years after the scandal, no one dared to mention Serena's name in Julian's presence, but rumors of her whereabouts were frequent. Some said she lived in London, others that she had returned to her family's home in New York. No one knew for sure. Julian was toasting with his guests, a practiced smile on his face, when the unmistakable roar of an approaching helicopter broke the evening's harmony. He wasn't expecting anyone else. All the important guests had already arrived. The aircraft landed on the private helipad he had recently built, a symbol of his power and exclusivity. Time seemed to stand still for Julian as he recognized Serena stepping out of the helicopter. She was more beautiful than ever, in a chic red dress that contrasted with her sun-kissed skin. Her hair, once long, was now a more mature, sophisticated bob. But what truly stopped his heart were the 4 identical children who accompanied her, with the same dark hair and piercing eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. Silence fell over the party like a shroud. Serena moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was doing, guiding the 4 children, who walked with her in perfect, dignified order. She stopped in front of Julian, whose face had gone completely pale. "Good evening, Julian," she said, her voice calm, almost cordial. "It's been a long time." Unable to utter a word, Julian stared at the 4 children who observed him with curiosity. They must have been about 4, maybe 5 years old. "We need to talk about the empire that your children will inherit someday," Serena continued, pulling a document from her purse. "I think you'll be interested to know that I own 15% of the shares in your company, enough to demand a seat on the board of directors." Julian's world crumbled around him. The 4 children were living proof of his mistake, his terrible miscalculation. And now Serena had returned, not as the victim he had cast out that autumn night, but as a powerful woman ready to reclaim what was rightfully hers. She had come for revenge, for money, for vindication. As he looked at the 4 little ones who were his spitting image, Julian Thorne knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The house of cards he had built on lies and pride was beginning to collapse, and the worst was yet to come. Follow along to find out what happens next. What do you think Serena's true intentions are? Will Julian's empire survive this unexpected challenge? Share your predictions in the comments below. The family legacy. The first rays of the Colorado sun filtered through the curtains of the master bedroom at the Grand Summit Hotel. But Julian Thorne had been awake for hours. Insomnia had become his constant companion since the night before, when Serena and those 4 children, his children, had stormed into his life like a tsunami threatening to wash everything away. The guests had left, muttering and casting discreet glances, eager to spread the scandal in their social circles. Victoria, her jaw tense and her eyes filled with contained fury, had stood by his side like an ice sculpture, calculating his every move. His mother, Eleanor, had tearfully embraced the children, instantly recognizing the family resemblance in their small faces. Matteo, Gabrielle, Hugo, and Julian. Serena had introduced the quadruplets with maternal pride. "Your grandchildren, Mrs. Thorne." Now, in the solitude of his room, Julian looked at a photograph he had hidden away at the bottom of a drawer. He and Serena, on their wedding day. She was smiling with such genuine happiness that it hurt to look at, while he maintained his serious expression, as if even then he knew the marriage was doomed. "Did you get any sleep?" Victoria's voice startled him. He hadn't heard her enter. "How could I? I have 4 children I never knew about, and an ex-wife who owns enough of my company to overthrow me." Victoria moved closer, wrapping him in a calculated embrace. "You shouldn't worry so much. My contacts at the firm are already investigating how she obtained those shares. If there was any irregularity, we'll find it." Julian pulled away abruptly. "You haven't seen those children, Victoria. They're identical to me. They're mine." The reality of those words hit him with full force. For 5 years, I lived convinced of a lie. And what if that's exactly what she wants you to think? Victoria's voice dripped with sweet venom. This wouldn't be the first time someone used children to manipulate a powerful man. Julian shook his head. He couldn't listen to her insinuations anymore. He needed answers. And only one person could give them to him. The house that Serena had rented on the outskirts of Los Angeles was considerably more modest than the hotel, but it exuded exquisite taste. Meticulously manicured gardens surrounded the property, and the sound of children's laughter floated from the backyard pool. Julian stayed in his car for a moment, gathering the courage to face reality. Finally, he rang the doorbell and waited, his heart pounding in his chest. An older woman with a kind face opened the door. "Mr. Thorne, I presume?" she said, with a distinct South American accent. "Mrs. Hayes is expecting you in the back garden." As he followed the woman through the house, Julian noticed details that revealed the children's presence. Carefully arranged toys, colorful drawings framed on the walls, photographs documenting moments he had never witnessed. Each image was a dagger to his conscience, a reminder of everything he had missed. Serena was sitting at an elegant garden table, with a cup of tea in her hands and documents scattered in front of her. She was dressed simply but elegantly, and the breeze played with her hair. When she saw him, a faint smile appeared on her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Good morning, Julian. I must confess I didn't expect to see you so soon." He sat down across from her, unable to hide his discomfort. "We need to talk. Where do you want to start? With your children? With the company shares? Or perhaps with the 5 years that have passed since you threw me out of your life like a criminal?" The coldness in her voice contrasted with the memory of the sweet, passionate woman she had been. Julian understood that time and pain had transformed her. "Let's start with the children," he said finally. "How is this possible? The doctors told me." "The doctors were wrong," Serena interrupted him firmly. "Or maybe they lied. Or maybe you were the one who preferred to believe a lie rather than trust your wife." Guilt twisted in Julian's stomach like a poisonous snake. "Where are they?" "At school. They're normal children, Julian, despite the extraordinary circumstances of their conception and birth. They go to school, they have friends, they play sports, they have grown up without a father. But they have not lacked love. Why didn't you look for me when they were born? Why wait 5 years?" Serena's laugh was bitter. "Are you serious? You publicly humiliated me. You accused me of infidelity. You threw me out of your house without a penny. And you expected me to run to you when I found out I was expecting not 1, but 4 of your children." Julian lowered his gaze, unable to meet the intensity of her eyes. "What do you want now, Serena? Revenge? Money?" "I want what's fair for my children. I haven't come to destroy you, although I could, with what I know about your business. I've come because one of them, Mateo, needs you. He has developed a rare medical condition that requires specialized treatment. And for that, we need your DNA." The revelation hit Julian like a bucket of cold water. "What's wrong with Mateo?" For the first time, Serena's mask of strength cracked. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "A rare autoimmune disease. The symptoms started 6 months ago. We've consulted specialists all over the world. The treatment he needs must be personalized based on his complete genetic information. We need samples of your DNA." Julian felt the world stop. One of his sons, a child he didn't know, but who carried his blood, was sick. While he had dedicated himself to accumulating wealth and power, his own children had grown up without him, without his support. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said, his voice broken. "Whatever it takes," Serena agreed, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. "Thank you." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, full of unspoken words and painful memories. "How did you get the shares?" Julian asked, trying to steer the conversation to a more familiar topic. Serena smiled with a mix of pride and defiance. I finished my business administration studies while raising 4 babies. It wasn't easy, but I had powerful motivation. When my aunt's inheritance was finally released after a long legal battle, I invested strategically. Your international expansion was hasty, Julian. You made mistakes that any first-year student would have avoided. When the shares fell, I was waiting to buy them. Julian couldn't help but smile wryly. You were always smarter than me. It's not about intelligence, but about perspective. You only saw numbers and profits. I saw people, needs, real opportunities. The arrival of the children from school interrupted their conversation. The sound of their voices filled the house, approaching the garden like a whirlwind of energy. "Mom, Matteo won the science fair," announced one of them, bursting into the garden, followed by his 3 brothers. The 4 stopped dead when they saw Julian. The silence that followed was the most painful Julian had ever experienced. 4 pairs of eyes, exact replicas of his own, studied him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Children," Serena said in a calm voice. "This is Julian Thorne, your father." Meanwhile, back at the Grand Summit Hotel, Victoria Hayes was having a phone conversation that would change the course of events. "Dad, she's back, and she's not alone." Lawrence Hayes, the owner of the rival hotel chain, smiled on the other end of the line. He had been waiting for years for an opportunity to get revenge on Julian, who had stolen several important contracts from him using questionable methods. "Are you sure they're his children?" "Interesting. Very interesting. Stay close to the situation and keep me informed. This could be the opportunity we've been waiting for." Victoria hung up, looking at the photograph of Julian and Serena she had found in the room. With a look of contempt, she threw it in the trash. No one, least of all that woman from the past, was going to get in the way of her plans. At the Thorne Group headquarters, the news of the return of Serena and the 4 heirs had spread like wildfire. The board of directors had called an emergency meeting. This could completely destabilize the company, argued Roberto Mendez, one of the most senior board members. Shareholders are nervous. The shares have fallen 3% just this morning. We must issue an official statement to calm the markets. "And what do you propose we say?" asked Leo Thorne, who had taken charge of the corporate social responsibility department after his sister-in-law's departure. "That my brother discovered 5 years later that he has 4 children? That he's been living a lie? That our former CLO has returned with enough shareholder power to challenge the board?" The silence that followed revealed the seriousness of the situation. No one had a satisfactory answer. Meanwhile, at the modest rented house, Julian faced the most difficult moment of his life. Getting to know his children. The 4 boys looked at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. "Why did you never come to see us?" asked Hugo, who seemed to be the oldest. The question, so direct and innocent, hit Julian harder than any adult accusation. I thought you weren't my children," he replied with sincerity. The lies had already caused enough damage. "But we look just like you," observed Gabriel, the quietest of the 4. "Everyone says so, I know, and I regret every day that I didn't realize it sooner." Matteo, the sick boy, stood slightly apart, watching him with eyes that seemed to hold a wisdom beyond his years. "Are you going to help me get better?" he asked finally. Julian felt his heart break. He knelt down in front of the boy, looking him in the eyes. "I will do everything in my power to make you well, I promise." "Julian, you have a chance to rewrite your family's story. How do you think you should begin to build trust with your children after being absent for so long? Share your advice." The final chapter, a new beginning. The bright lights of the UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles instilled equal parts respect and hope. Julian Thorne, sitting in a cold waiting room, was experiencing a vulnerability that was alien to him. The tests to determine his genetic compatibility with Matteo had been scheduled urgently, thanks to his contacts and influence. Next to him, Serena absently flipped through a magazine, though it was clear she wasn't paying attention. The dark circles under her eyes betrayed nights of insomnia and worry for her son's health. "How long has he been sick?" Julian asked, breaking the uncomfortable silence. Serena looked up, surprised by the question. "The first symptoms appeared 6 months ago. At first, we thought it was just a cold. Then came the joint pain, constant fatigue, and unexplained fevers." Her voice cracked slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. "We consulted specialists in London, where we were living. When the diagnosis was confirmed, I knew we had to come back. We needed your DNA for the personalized treatment. Why didn't I just contact you? Would a simple text or call have convinced you after 5 years? I needed you to see them, to recognize yourself in them." Julian couldn't argue with her logic. Distrust had always been his biggest flaw. "Mr. Thorne," a nurse called from the doorway. "Dr. Evans will see you now." The specialist, a middle-aged man with a reassuring demeanor, received them in his office. "Mateo's condition is uncommon, but not hopeless," he explained after reviewing the preliminary results. "His immune system is attacking certain cells in his own body, which causes inflammation and tissue damage. With the right treatment, he will be able to live a completely normal life." "And for that treatment, you need my DNA?" Julian asked. "Exactly. The most effective therapy requires the design of specific monoclonal antibodies based on the patient's complete genetic profile. For that, we need samples from both parents. The good news is that, according to these preliminary tests, you are, without a doubt, Mateo's biological father." Those words, spoken with objective scientific precision, confirmed what Julian's heart already knew. They were his children. They always had been. "What are the next steps?" he asked, determined to do whatever was necessary. "We will need to perform a bone marrow extraction. It's an invasive procedure, but essential for the treatment. It will be done under general anesthesia." Julian nodded, though a shiver ran down his spine. Since childhood, hospitals had caused him irrational terror, the result of a traumatic experience when, at the age of 8, he had to undergo emergency surgery after an accident. "Let's do it tomorrow," he decided, ignoring his fear. "And how long will it take for the treatment to be ready after that?" "About 2 or 3 weeks. In the meantime, we will continue with the current therapy to control the symptoms." As they left the consultation, Julian noticed that Serena was watching him with an unreadable expression. "What is it?" he asked. "Nothing. It's just, I didn't expect you to agree so quickly. I remember you being more calculating. People change, Serena. Or maybe you just never truly knew me. Or maybe you're the one who never truly knew yourself," she replied softly. That afternoon, Julian visited his hotel suite to pick up some personal belongings. He had decided to move to a nearby hotel temporarily to be available during Mateo's treatment. He was surprised to find his mother, Eleanor, playing with the 4 children in the park. "Mom, what is this?" Eleanor stood up, her dignity a tangible presence, while the children continued to play happily with a dog Julian didn't remember seeing before. "I invited Serena and my grandchildren to spend the afternoon. This is their home, too. Serena and I are divorced, Mom, and this place is mine." Eleanor looked at him with that expression that, since childhood, had made him feel small and insignificant. "This hotel has been the home of the Thorne family for 3 generations. It belongs to the family, not just to you. And those children are Thornes, whether you like it or not." Julian ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Things are not that simple." "Of course they are. You have 4 wonderful children and an ex-wife who, despite all the pain you caused her, has had the generosity to return so you can meet your children and help save one of their lives. What could be simpler than that?" Just then, Mateo approached them cautiously. Of the 4, he was the most reserved, perhaps because of his illness. "Grandma Eleanor says you have pictures from when you were little," he said, looking at Julian. "Can I see them? I want to know if I look like you." Julian's heart skipped a beat at such a simple yet profound request. Of course, they're in my office. Come on, I'll show you. As they went up the stairs, Julian felt Matteo's small hand find his. That simple gesture of a child's trust disarmed all his defenses. In the office, he took out albums he hadn't looked at in years, photographs of his childhood, family vacations, school sports. Look, I was your age here, he said, pointing to a picture of him with a swimming trophy. Matteo studied the photo carefully. You have my eyes and my nose, but Mom says I have her smile. She's right, Julian said, a bittersweet memory. Your mother has a beautiful smile. The boy nodded seriously. That's why she doesn't smile much, to save it for special occasions, like she does. The observation, so sharp, yet so innocent, deeply moved Julian. These children had inherited not only his physical features, but also their mother's observant nature and hidden sensitivity. Tomorrow they'll do some tests on me at the hospital, Julian said, trying to explain the procedure in a way a 5-year-old could understand. Those tests will help the doctors prepare the medicine you need. Matteo looked at him with his dark eyes, full of an unusual wisdom for his age. Are you scared? I'm scared of needles. Julian couldn't lie in the face of that gaze so much like his own. Yes, I'm scared. I haven't liked hospitals since I was a little boy. Me neither, Matteo confessed. But Mom says sometimes you have to be brave, even if you're scared. Your mother is a very wise woman. Meanwhile, at the Thorn Group headquarters, Victoria Hayes was holding a closed-door meeting with several board members. Julian is emotionally compromised, she argued with calculated passion. These personal decisions are seriously affecting the company. The shares continue to fall. Investors are nervous. What exactly are you proposing? Asked Roberto Mendez, who had always been loyal to Julian. A vote of no confidence. We need Julian to take a temporary leave while he resolves his family matters. I can assume the executive management during that period. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. What Victoria was proposing was practically a corporate coup. We would need the support of at least 60% of the shareholders, another board member pointed out. And Julian controls 40%. Victoria smiled confidently. Not anymore. With the 15% his ex-wife owns, his control has significantly decreased, and I have reason to believe that Serena Hayes would be willing to support this motion. What Victoria didn't mention was the conversation she had had that morning with her father, Lawrence. He had proposed a merger between the two hotel chains, with him as president of the resulting group and Victoria as CEO. The first step, depose Julian Thorne. The morning of the bone marrow extraction, Julian woke up startled by a recurring nightmare. He saw himself as a child, abandoned in a hospital, while his father walked away without looking back. The fear of needles, of anesthesia, of the absolute vulnerability of being unconscious in the hands of strangers, paralyzed him. Everything will be fine, Serena reassured him, having come to the hospital to accompany him, though she maintained a clear emotional distance. It's a routine procedure. The anesthesiologist explained the process. As the nurses prepared the necessary equipment, Julian, dressed in a hospital gown, had never felt so helpless. When you wake up, it will all be over, the doctor said, as the anesthesia began to take effect. Think of something pleasant as you go to sleep. The one image that came to his mind in those last moments of consciousness was not of his business successes or his luxurious properties. It was of 4 identical boys laughing in the park, and Serena watching them with a mix of pride and infinite love. When he woke up hours later, the first thing he saw was Serena, dozing in an uncomfortable chair next to his bed. She had stayed there throughout the procedure. You came back? He whispered, his voice hoarse from the intubation. Serena opened her eyes, momentarily disoriented. The boys wanted to know you were okay. I promised them I'd take care of you. The pain in his lower back was intense, but Julian barely noticed. A more powerful sensation filled him: gratitude. "Thank you," he said simply, "for staying, for the children, for everything." Serena looked away, uncomfortable with his unusual vulnerability. "You should rest. The doctor said you can leave tomorrow if everything goes well." But when she tried to get up to leave, Julian gently took her hand. "Stay, please. Just a little longer." And against all odds, she stayed. What do you think of Serena's surprising change of heart? How will Julian's regrets influence his future decisions? Share your thoughts. A new chapter begins. In the following days, while Julian recovered at the Grand Summit Hotel under the care of his mother, and with daily visits from the children, Serena dedicated herself to investigating the company's financial situation. Her business background and years of experience allowed her to see clearly what others missed. What she discovered deeply alarmed her. The international expansion that Julian had undertaken was based on loans with abusive clauses and contracts that seriously compromised the company's future viability. Someone had deliberately given him bad advice, leading him toward a planned financial disaster. That someone had a name: Victoria Hayes. The night of the Bonfires Festival illuminated the Californian coast with pyres that reflected on the ocean like fallen stars. The tradition dictated that on the shortest night of the year, wishes written on paper and thrown into the fire would come true, while bad memories would be consumed by the purifying flames. The Grand Summit Hotel, for the first time in 5 years, was bustling with children's activity. The Quadruplets, fascinated by the celebration, ran on the private beach under the watchful eye of Eleanor, who had organized a small family party for the occasion. Julian, still in pain from the bone marrow extraction weeks ago, watched the scene from the terrace. The children's laughter mingled with the sound of the waves. "You shouldn't be on your feet so long," Serena's voice surprised him. "The doctor recommended rest." "I'm fine," he replied automatically. "How's Mateo?" "The first results of the treatment are promising. The inflammation has decreased, and the fever hasn't returned in 3 days." An invisible weight was lifted from Julian's shoulders. Since learning of his son's diagnosis, he had lived with a constant fear he would never admit out loud. "I'm glad," he said simply, unable to express the magnitude of his relief. Serena leaned on the railing next to him, watching the children who were now helping Eleanor prepare the bonfire. The closeness of her body, the subtle perfume she had always worn, awakened forgotten memories in Julian. "Do you remember our first night of the bonfires?" she asked, as if reading his mind. "How could I forget? I took you to that hidden cove near Malibu, and we wrote our wishes and threw them into the fire together. I asked for us to start a family," Serena continued, her gaze lost on the horizon. The revelation hit Julian hard. "You never told me. You're not supposed to reveal your wishes if you want them to come true. Although, I guess in the end, it came true in a way neither of us could have imagined." The silence was charged with emotion. "And what did you ask for that night?" Serena finally asked. Julian hesitated before answering. "I asked not to become my father." The irony of that unfulfilled wish hung between them like a ghost. Julian had repeated the very pattern he feared most. "You still have time to break that cycle," Serena said softly, surprising him with her understanding. "They need you, especially Mateo." Before Julian could respond, his phone interrupted the moment. It was Leo, his brother. "Julian, you have to come to the office immediately. Victoria has called an emergency board meeting. They're planning a vote of no confidence to temporarily remove you from leadership." The news left him momentarily speechless. "On what grounds?" "Temporary incapacity due to personal matters. They argue that your family situation is affecting your business judgment and the company's stability." Rage began to boil inside Julian. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. As he hung up, he met Serena's inquisitive gaze. "Business problems?" "Victoria Hayes is making her move," she guessed. I'm not surprised. I've been investigating the international expansion operations you undertook after our divorce. Someone deliberately gave you bad advice, Julian. Those contracts are designed to weaken the company in the long term. Julian looked at her in surprise. How do you know? Because I know the industry as well as you do, and because I have access to the information as a shareholder. The question is, Chamo, who would benefit from the fall of the Thorn Group? The answer was obvious. Lawrence Hayes, Victoria's father, and the owner of the rival hotel chain. I have to go, Julian said, heading toward the house. Enjoy the party with the kids. I'm coming with you, Serena declared firmly. My shares could be decisive in that vote. The glass and steel building that housed the Thorn Group headquarters shone under the last lights of the sunset. In the boardroom on the top floor, the entire board of directors waited with tense expressions. When Julian walked in, followed by Serena, a murmur of surprise rippled through the room. No one expected his ex-wife to appear alongside the man she was supposedly there to destroy. Victoria, elegantly dressed in a vibrant red suit, could not hide her discomfort at Serena's presence. This is a private board of directors meeting, she said coldly. Mrs. Hayes is not authorized to be here. Mrs. Hayes owns 15% of the shares in this company, Julian replied calmly. She has every right to be present. Roberto Mendez, as the most senior board member, took the floor. Julian, this meeting was called to discuss the difficult situation the company is facing. Some board members believe that your current personal circumstances may be affecting your ability to lead effectively. In other words, Julian interrupted him, Victoria has convinced you that I need a break while she takes control. Am I wrong? The uncomfortable silence confirmed his suspicion. Before we proceed with any vote, he continued, I would like to present some information that might change the board's perspective. With a gesture, he invited Serena to speak. She stepped forward with the confidence of someone who knows her ground perfectly. In recent weeks, I have thoroughly analyzed the international expansion contracts signed by this company in the last 3 years, she began, projecting documents onto the large screen. What I have discovered is, to say the least, concerning. For the next half hour, Serena surgically exposed how the agreement signed under Victoria's advice contained hidden clauses that seriously compromised the company's long-term viability. Worse, she showed how those clauses indirectly benefited Hayes Hospitality Group, Victoria's father's company. In short, Serena concluded, we are facing a clear case of conflict of interest that borders on illegality. Ms. Hayes has used her privileged position to systematically weaken the Thorn Group while strengthening her father's company. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Victoria, pale with fury, jumped to her feet. This is a slander. I will not allow a scorned woman who left the company 5 years ago to come here and make unfounded accusations. Unfounded? Serena smiled calmly. Every piece of data is supported by documents signed by you yourself, Victoria. And as for being scorned, I remind you that Julian publicly threw me out of his life, not the other way around. Roberto Mendez, visibly agitated by the revelations, intervened. I think we should postpone any vote until these documents are verified by our legal department. That seems reasonable, Julian agreed. Meanwhile, I suggest that Ms. Hayes be temporarily suspended from her duties until this possible conflict of interest is clarified. The vote for this precautionary measure was unanimous, with Victoria's forced abstention. Before leaving the room, she stopped in front of Serena with a look filled with hatred. This won't be the end, she whispered, so only Serena could hear. My father and I have invested too much time in this plan for an upstart to ruin everything. Serena held her gaze without flinching. You should have researched my history better, Victoria. No one who has raised 4 children at the same time is easily scared. What do you think of Serena's strategic genius? How will this corporate battle end? Leave your predictions in the comments below. A house of cards back at the hotel, the atmosphere in the car was strangely intimate. The adrenaline of the confrontation had given way to a shared calm between Julian and Serena. "Thank you," he said finally, breaking the silence. "Not just for today, but for opening my eyes about Victoria. I've been a complete idiot." "You wouldn't be the first man to be manipulated by an attractive woman with a hidden agenda," she replied with an ironic smile. "Besides, I have as much interest as you in the company prospering. It's our children's future. Our children." Those two words resonated in Julian's heart, an echo of what could have been, of what might still be. "Why did you really come back, Serena?" he asked, momentarily looking away from the road to observe her profile. "You could have sent your lawyers for the shares. You could have contacted me discreetly about Mateo's treatment. Why the dramatic entrance at the party? Why expose yourself like that?" Serena remained silent for so long that Julian thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice had a vulnerability she hadn't shown him in years. "Because I needed to see your face when you saw the children. I needed to know if there was anything human left in you. Something of the man I fell in love with. Is there anything left of that man?" Julian's question hung in the air. "I think he's fighting to get out," she finally answered. "But first, he has a lot of demons to overcome." When they arrived at the Grand Summit Hotel, they found the bonfire party in full swing. Eleanor had organized a small bonfire on the private beach, and the children were jumping around it, following the tradition of asking the purifying fire to ward off bad things and bring good luck. Hugo, the most extroverted of the four, ran toward them as soon as he saw them. "Dad, Mom, you have to write your wishes. Grandma says it's tradition." It was the first time one of the children had called him that, and the emotional impact was so strong that Julian had to blink back tears. Gabriel approached with 2 small pieces of paper and pencils. "You have to write something you want to happen, and something you want to forget," he explained. "Then you throw them in the fire, and they come true." Serena and Julian exchanged a knowing look, remembering that distant night of the bonfires, when they were young and in love. As they wrote their wishes, Mateo approached his father cautiously. "What are you going to ask for, Dad?" he asked curiously. Julian looked at the blank paper, feeling the weight of the last 5 years, of the wrong decisions, of the lost opportunities. Finally, he wrote, "I wish to be the father my children deserve, and the man Serena believed I could be." "And what did you ask for?" he asked his son, carefully folding the paper so no one could read its contents. "I asked for all of us to stay together," Mateo replied with a child's honesty. "You, Mom, my brothers, Grandma, like a normal family." The simplicity of the boy's wish contrasted painfully with the complexity of the adult's situation. Julian hugged his son, feeling something break and heal at the same time inside him. "That's a good wish," he whispered against the boy's hair, identical to his own. "A very good wish." When it was time to throw the papers into the fire, the whole family formed a circle. One by one, they cast their wishes into the flames. When it was Serena's turn, Julian thought he saw a tear roll down her cheek. What had she asked for? Was there still room in her heart for the man who had caused her so much pain? As the night progressed, the children, exhausted, finally fell asleep. Eleanor retired to her room, leaving Serena and Julian alone on the terrace, contemplating the last embers of the bonfire and the calm sea under the full moon. "You know what's most ironic?" Serena commented, breaking the comfortable silence. "That when you threw me out that night, I was planning to leave you." The confession surprised Julian. "Why?" "Because I had discovered you weren't the man I thought you were. You had become someone cold, obsessed with power and control, incapable of showing genuine vulnerability or affection. When I found out I was pregnant, I decided to give you one last chance. We both know how that turned out." "And now?" Julian asked. "Who do you think I am now?" Serena looked him directly in the eyes. That depends on you, Julian, on the decisions you make from now on. What do you think Serena wished for? What is the most important lesson Julian has learned so far? Leave your comments below. A fresh start. The autumn in Colorado painted the Grand Summit Hotel gardens in shades of ochre and gold. 3 months had passed since that night of the bonfires. Julian, sitting on the porch with a steaming cup of coffee, watched his 4 children play in the garden under Eleanor's watchful eye. The boys had started school in Los Angeles, adapting with surprising ease. Mateo, in particular, showed clear improvement. The treatment developed with Julian's bone marrow was working better than expected. His cheeks, once pale, now had a healthy color, and his energy was increasing daily, allowing him to play almost at the same pace as his brothers. The results are extraordinary, Dr. Evans had said at the last checkup. The response to the personalized treatment has exceeded our most optimistic expectations. If he continues like this, in 6 months we could be talking about a complete remission. Those words had lightened the invisible weight Julian had carried since he learned of his son's illness, a son he was only just beginning to know, but who already had an irreplaceable place in his heart. Footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Serena approached with several documents in her hand, and that determined expression he knew so well. "The reports from the external audit have just arrived," she announced, sitting next to him. "It's worse than we thought." After the revelations about Victoria's role in the company's financial debacle, the board had ordered a full audit of all international operations. The preliminary results confirmed the suspicions, a deliberate strategy to weaken the Thorn Group for the benefit of Hayes Hospitality Group. "How much time do we have before the situation is irreversible?" Julian asked, studying the graphs that showed an alarming drop in profit margins. 6 months, maybe less," Serena replied frankly, "unless we implement drastic changes." In recent weeks, they had worked together on a rescue plan. Their professional relationship had evolved, regaining some of the camaraderie that had once united them. They shared the same goal: save the company their children would one day inherit. "I have a proposal," Serena continued, showing him a detailed strategic plan. "While in London, I established valuable contacts with European investors interested in expanding to the US. If we reorient our expansion toward a strategic alliance instead of direct competition, we could reverse the situation." Julian studied the proposal carefully. It was brilliant, innovative, and, most importantly, viable. But it required a fundamental change in his business philosophy. He would have to give up some of the absolute control he had always exercised. "This means completely reorganizing the board of directors," he observed, immediately identifying the most delicate implication. "We would have to appoint new directors for key areas, people we can trust completely," Serena agreed. The proposal also involved another significant change. She would take on the role of Director of International Operations. Her experience in the European market would be crucial. "Are you sure you want to get involved at that level?" Julian asked. "It would mean less time with the children." A melancholic smile appeared on Serena's lips. "I've been a full-time mother for 5 years. The boys are growing up, starting school. It's the perfect time to resume my career, especially if it secures their future." The silence that followed was full of meaning. Both knew that this decision would definitively alter the dynamic between them. They would no longer be simply ex-spouses united by their children, but partners in an ambitious business project. "There's something else you should know," Serena added. "I've received an offer from Lawrence Hayes." Julian visibly tensed. "What kind of offer?" "He wants to buy my shares at a price well above market value. In exchange, he would withdraw the lawsuits he is preparing against you for alleged mismanagement." The news didn't surprise Julian. After Victoria's suspension and the start of the internal investigation, Lawrence had launched an aggressive campaign to further destabilize the company. "What did you tell him?" "That my shares are not for sale, at least not to him." Their gazes met, communicating without words what they both knew. They were together in this battle, united by a bond stronger than past resentment. That same afternoon, while Julian was reviewing old family documents, he found a carved wooden box he didn't remember seeing before. Inside were yellowed letters, faded photographs, and a personal diary with the unmistakable handwriting of his grandfather, George Thorne. Intrigued, he began to read. What he discovered in those pages completely changed his understanding of his family history. George Thorne had not abandoned his family, as he had always been told. He had been forced to distance himself to protect them when he discovered that his business partner and best friend, David Hayes, Serena's grandfather, was involved in illegal activities that could have sent both of them to prison. "I'd rather my son hate me, believing me a coward, than see him suffer the consequences of my mistakes," George had written in the last entry, dated shortly before his death. "One day, when the danger has passed, I hope the truth comes to light, and he understands that what seemed like abandonment was, in fact, the most painful act of love in my life." Julian felt the world reel. His entire life, he had grown up hating the memory of a grandfather he believed was a coward, a man who had abandoned his family out of selfishness. This discovery not only rehabilitated George's image, but also explained the origin of the pathological fear of abandonment that had marked generations in his family. With the diary in hand, he sought out Serena, who was helping the children with their homework in the living room. "I have to show you something," he said, with an urgency in his voice that made her follow him without question. As Serena read the pages of the diary, her face reflected the same shock Julian had felt. "My grandfather was involved in illegal activities, and yours sacrificed his family relationships to protect all of us." Julian nodded. "This secret has poisoned our families for generations, Serena. My father grew up believing he had been abandoned, developing the same fear that he then passed on to me." "And you repeated the pattern," she completed, finally understanding the origin of that innate distrust that had always characterized Julian. "The fear of abandonment led you to abandon first, before you could be abandoned." The truth, so simple and yet so profound, fell upon them like a revelation. The cycle of pain that had tormented Thorne family for decades could finally be broken. The rescue plan proposed by Serena was presented to the board of directors and, after an intense debate, was approved by a narrow margin. As expected, the reorganization involved painful changes. Several executives loyal to Victoria were relieved of their duties, and new talent joined key positions. Lawrence Hayes, seeing himself deprived of his informant in the company, intensified his media and legal attacks. But the strategy designed by Serena began to bear fruit. The first agreements with European investors injected fresh capital and opened new markets for the Thorne hotels. What was most surprising to those who knew Julian was his ability to adapt to the new shared power structure. For the first time in his career, he was learning to delegate, to trust the judgment of others, to listen to different perspectives. "You've become wiser," Eleanor observed one afternoon, as they watched the children decorate the hotel for Christmas. "I've come to understand what really matters," he replied simply. "And it's not properties or shares." The traditional Christmas Eve dinner at the Grand Summit Hotel had always been a major event on the social calendar. This year, however, Julian had decided it would be an intimate family celebration. Only the closest, Eleanor, Leo, the children, a few lifelong friends, and, of course, Serena, were present. The living room sparkled with Christmas decorations. A huge real tree dominated the space, loaded with traditional ornaments and twinkling lights. Soft carols played in the background, mixing with the laughter and conversations of the guests. Matteo, fully recovered, ran with his brothers around the table where the traditional dinner would be served. His transformation was the best gift Julian could have received. "He's more and more like you every day," Serena commented, approaching with 2 glasses of sparkling cider. Not just physically, but in his determination, in his way of analyzing every situation before acting. Julian accepted the glass, allowing himself a moment to admire the woman who, against all odds, had returned to his life. "Thank you," he said simply, "for everything, for saving the company, for raising our children so wonderfully, for giving me a second chance I don't deserve." Serena smiled. "We all deserve second chances, Julian. The important thing is what we do with them." When it was time to sit down for dinner, Julian surprised everyone by asking for silence for a special toast. With his glass raised, he looked at each person present, finally stopping at Serena. "Tonight, I want to share something I've recently discovered. That true value is not in keeping up appearances or in accumulating power, but in recognizing our mistakes and working to correct them." His voice, usually firm and authoritative, trembled slightly with emotion. 5 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life. I let pride and fear drive me away from the only thing that was truly valuable, my family. Tonight, publicly, I want to ask Serena for her forgiveness for the pain I caused her." Silent tears rolled down Eleanor's and Leo's cheeks. The children watched the scene with curiosity. "I can't change the past," Julian continued, "but I can offer you, Serena, a different future. I'm not asking for us to go back to what we were. I'm asking for the opportunity to build something new, something better, based on mutual respect and love for our children. I'm asking for time to rebuild the trust I destroyed, to show you that I've changed, to maybe one day win back your love." The silence that followed seemed to hold the breath of the entire world. Serena, her eyes bright with unshed tears, finally stood up. "Time has taught us both a lot, Julian. It has shown us that what seemed like a definitive end was, in reality, just a detour on our path. Our children are living proof that sometimes, from the greatest pain, the greatest blessings can be born." Taking her glass, she raised it in a gesture that contained hope and promise. "To second chances, to the family we are rebuilding, to the future that awaits us, whatever its form." As their glasses clinked, sealing that non-verbal pact, the quadruplets ran to hug their parents, forming a perfect circle of love and possibility. Outside, the warm December night of Los Angeles enveloped the hotel in a gentle sea breeze. The stars shone brightly over the Pacific, silent witnesses to a story that, like so many others, had needed to move away from its origin to finally find its true destiny. What do you think is the ultimate message of this story? Let me know your thoughts on this new beginning.